This question comes from James, who asks, why do women test men? At first, that sounds like the setup to a bad stand-up comedy bit. Like, you think you're just going to dinner, but nope, you're actually sitting for the SATs of romance. But it turns out there is some real psychology behind it. And not only that, if you follow this idea far enough, you end up in a weird place where science, biology, and human survival all collide. So buckle in. By the end of this, you'll see how little jokes, playful challenges, and even arguments connect to some of the deepest wiring in the human brain. And maybe, just maybe, you'll understand why your last date felt suspiciously like a pop quiz. Let's start obvious. In dating culture, there's this common phrase, women test men. Sometimes it's playful, like teasing him to see if he laughs it off. Sometimes it's more serious, like asking tough questions about his future. And sometimes it's subtle, like showing up late to see if he reacts with patience or anger. Now, whether you call that testing, filtering, or just interacting, the idea is that behavior reveals more than words. Anyone can say they are confident, kind, or loyal. But when you bump into a tiny, stressful moment, that's when the truth leaks out. It is kind of like shaking a soda can. You only see what is inside once there's pressure. But let's exaggerate this. Imagine if testing were not just a social thing, but an official government-run program. Every time you asked someone out, you had to pass a series of exams. Written test, multiple choice, maybe a surprise essay question. Question 1. A waiter gets your order wrong. Do you A. Yell at them, B. Politely correct them, tip extra because you pity their existence, D. Cry? Question 2. Your partner says, does this outfit make me look weird? What do you do? If you fail enough of these, you get banned from dating for a year. Society would grind to a halt because 90% of us would be single forever. All right, back to reality. Where does this actually come from? Psychologists call it mate selection pressure. Humans, unlike many animals, invest heavily in raising children. That means choosing a bad partner can literally ruin your survival chances. So across evolution, women, who faced higher risks from pregnancy and child-rearing, developed sharper filters. Testing wasn't about being mean, it was about survival. In the deep past, if a man got angry too easily, he might put the group in danger during a hunt. If he boasted about skills but collapsed under stress, the family could starve. If he seemed loyal but wandered off, a child might not survive. So subtle tests became a way to sniff out the real qualities behind the words. Think of it like a primitive stress test. Here's where it gets even stranger. These little tests don't just show character, they also trigger chemical reactions. For example, when you tease someone and they laugh instead of getting defensive, their brain releases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. That makes both people feel closer. But if they snap angrily, your brain releases cortisol, the stress hormone, which basically screams, abort mission, do not date this person, danger. It's like a secret emotional lie detector. But let's run a wild thought experiment. Imagine if women took this testing idea to the extreme. Every man had to go through an obstacle course before being allowed on a first date. Level 1. You walk through a grocery store while your date asks, do you even know how to cook? And you must assemble a balanced meal from scratch. Level 2. You're locked in a room with a crying baby simulator. Can you soothe it or will you start crying first? Final boss. Her mother shows up unannounced and asks you about your long-term career prospects while glaring. You must answer calmly without sweating. If you pass, congratulations, you earn dinner. If you fail, you are escorted out by relationship referees. Honestly, it sounds harsh, but part of me thinks this would make dating apps way more entertaining. All right, back to science again. Evolutionary psychologists argue that what we call testing today is really a modern form of what our ancestors did instinctively. Here's a fun fact. In many bird species, females test males by making them perform tasks. Penguins, for instance, use the famous pebble test. A male penguin must find and present a perfect pebble to his mate. If she likes it, they build a nest together. If not, he is rejected. That is basically Tinder, except instead of swiping, you are judged by your rock collecting skills. Humans obviously don't exchange pebbles anymore. But compliments, jokes, patience, or even handling small conflicts, they all play the same role. They are modern pebbles. Now here's where things get meta. Men test women too. It is just less talked about. For example, a man might see how supportive she is when he shares a problem, or how she reacts when plans go wrong, or whether she is generous with friends. Both sides are running experiments, often unconsciously. Relationships, in this view, are like two scientists secretly testing each other while pretending it is all just casual conversation. But let's crank this scenario up one more level. Imagine if people could see the test results in real time. You are on a date, and every time you answer a question, a little scoreboard pops up over your head. Patience level 75%, loyalty 90%, humor 65% but falling fast. Would dating be easier or harder? On one hand, no one could fake it. On the other hand, the mystery would vanish. And half the fun of relationships is slowly discovering someone's true self. Okay, but here's the deeper science. Why not just take people at their word? Why must humans rely on indirect cues? The answer is that words are cheap. In evolutionary biology, there is something called the handicap principle. The idea is that a real signal of quality is one that is costly to fake. For example, a peacock's huge tail is ridiculous. It makes him easier to catch by predators. But if he can survive with that giant, flashy burden, it signals he must be very strong. Humans do the same. Keeping calm under playful teasing is hard to fake if you are insecure. Showing patience in small frustrations is costly if you are impulsive. Being generous with others when resources are scarce signals real long-term value. So testing is not cruelty. It is survival, disguised as social banter. But here's where things get hilariously messy. Humans live in a modern world where the original survival stakes are gone. You don't need to test if someone can hunt a mammoth or fend off wolves. Instead, people improvise as new tests, like, does he tip waiters well? Does he remember birthdays? Does he like dogs? Sometimes these tests make sense. A person who is kind to service workers probably will be kind at home. But sometimes the tests are random. If he doesn't text back within 10 minutes, he must not care. That's like rejecting a penguin because his pebble was slightly too shiny. Quirky aside, there's actually a study showing that when women smiled less at men during speed dating events, men ended up more attracted to them. Why? Because it triggered a challenge response. It is the same mechanism that makes people obsessed with claw machines, even though they almost never win. The difficulty makes it feel more valuable. In other words, testing works not just because it reveals traits, but also because it makes the prize feel worth chasing. So let's recap before we hit the twist. Women test men because words are cheap, survival required reliable signals, and tiny stress tests expose real qualities. It works because of brain chemistry, evolutionary principles, and even weird penguin behavior. But here's the twist. Testing is not just about filtering bad partners, it is also about building trust. When you see someone pass your little tests, staying calm, staying kind, staying funny, it builds a history of evidence. That stack of micro victories is what makes people feel safe enough to love. So the weird psychology of why women test men is not about games. It is about survival, bonding, and trust. And if you zoom out even more, here's the truly strange thought. All of human society might rest on little tests. Friendships, jobs, communities, every relationship begins with tiny experiments. Can I trust you? Will you support me? Do you panic under stress, or do you adapt? Without those tests, humans might not have formed the social webs that let us survive ice ages, predators, and plagues. So in a way, every awkward first date, every tiny playful challenge, every pop quiz of romance, it is all part of a billion-year-old survival exam. And the fact that you are alive today means your ancestors passed. Imagine if we stopped testing entirely. No filters, no challenges, no subtle cues, just blind acceptance. At first it sounds peaceful, but in practice, humans would probably trust the wrong people constantly. Societies might collapse under betrayal and chaos. So the testing, annoying as it feels, is secretly one of the most important features keeping human relationships stable. It is not a bug. It is the code that makes love possible. So the next time you feel like you are being tested, remember, this is not an exam you study for. It is just your brain and their brain running ancient software written by survival itself. And if you pass, you don't just win a date, you win trust. That's the weird psychology of why women test men. But it makes me wonder, what if humans had an actual scoreboard floating over their heads? showing honesty, loyalty, or courage in real time? Would dating become easier? Or would society collapse overnight? That's a question for another day. This has been Curious Joe. Thanks for listening, and remember, life is one big what if.